Welcome to the Deep Dive. You share some really compelling material with us, these excerpts from Prayer and Strategic Collaboration, Uniting Movements, Churches, and Cities. And what really jumps out is this powerful idea that, the unity we often talk about wanting in our churches, our movements, our cities, well, maybe the key is something we often do alone, but haven't really harnessed together. Strategically, prayer.
That's a fascinating point, isn't it? We tend to focus so much on the tangible things, the meetings, the shared programs, the budgets. But these sources, they really push us to ask if we're missing something deeper, a sort of spiritual dynamic. Could it be the real game changer in how we actually work together?
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, our mission is to really dig into these excerpts. We want to pull out the most important insights on how prayer can be that catalyst. We'll look at practical frameworks, some inspiring examples, and hopefully answer this question for you. What are the key to breaking down those silos you see, those barriers in your community, and really achieving greater impact?
Yeah.
What if it isn't some brand new program, but actually a renewed, a more focused approach to prayer? One of the first things that really struck me was this idea that, coordinated prayer across different churches is often treated as secondary, like a spiritual appetizer, before the main course of action.
Yeah, a prelude, not the powerhouse it could be.
Exactly.
And what's interesting here is the suggestion that prayer isn't just about preparing for collaboration. It might actually be the very architecture for it, the framework. Think about it. When leaders from different groups are genuinely seeking God together for their community, they're connecting on a really fundamental level, right? They're aligning their hearts, their vision with what they sense God is saying.
It's like drawing the blueprints together in prayer.
Precisely.
The text also talks about this kairos moment, this kind of convergence of cultural fragmentation, maybe spiritual hunger. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Are separate efforts, our sort of go-it-alone models really enough right now?
That's a crucial question the sources raise. Are our current ways, even when well-intentioned, sufficient for the challenges we're facing? Complex social issues, maybe growing secularism. The argument is pretty strong that fragmented efforts, maybe even ministries that end up competing unintentionally, they just might not cut it. We might need something more unified, more spiritually grounded.
And it's not just about individuals praying more on their own, is it? The text mentions a fresh playbook emerging, like new tools to intentionally harness prayer together.
Yeah, things like unified prayer calendars, even real-time strategy boards for intercessors online. It sounds very practical, very modern.
It does.
And what's compelling is the intentionality. It moves prayer from just being spontaneous and individual to something coordinated, focused on shared priorities. It's really about shifting our view of prayer, isn't it? From just a personal discipline to seeing its potential as a strategic force for collective action, community transformation.
So thinking about your own context, your sphere of influence, what silos do you see? Maybe between different denominations or organizations working on similar issues, but separately. How could united prayer, even starting small, begin to bridge those divides?
There's this really vivid metaphor the text uses, the body of Christ as a mosaic, all these radiant, beautiful tiles, but they're separated, each one reflecting light, doing its thing.
But the full picture, the combined radiance, isn't quite there because they're not connected.
Right, and that flows right into the scriptural basis, doesn't it? 1 Corinthians 12, one body, many parts all needing each other, that interdependence. Exactly. And then there's that powerful image from Ecclesiastes 4.12, the cord of 3 strands. It's not easily broken. And here, prayer is presented as, the first strand, alongside purpose and partnership, bound by the Spirit.
Prayer is the foundational strand, and the text even calls it the loom, where unity gets woven.
It points to those key moments in Acts, right? The upper room prayer before Pentecost, the prayer before sending out Barnabas and Saul.
Showing how prayer actually framed their vision, aligned their hearts, knit their purposes together before the big action steps.
Yeah, it wasn't an afterthought.
Okay, so if unity is so vital, where does all this fragmentation come from? The text starts with something called the allure of theological distinction, which is kind of ironic, isn't it?
It really is. Our zeal for truth, our commitment to sound doctrine, which is good.
But it can inadvertently build walls.
Exactly. Emphases on specific doctrines, different worship styles, even how we structure church leadership. These things, while maybe valid in themselves, can become barriers if we let them define the edges of our fellowship, prevent collaboration.
And it's not just theology, is it? The sources talk about historical and cultural divides, too.
Oh, definitely. Past church splits, The legacy of colonialism in some places, language barriers, social strata, these can create really deep, lasting fractures.
Fractures that still hinder collaboration today.
Right. And these historical wounds, these cultural gaps, they can become really ingrained. Unless we're intentional about understanding them, acknowledging them, actively working towards reconciliation, well, collaboration stays difficult. The fragmentation just continues.
But then the text shifts, thankfully, to the transformative power of prayer, how it can actually deepen that cord of unity. And it describes prayer not just as asking, but as discerning the heartbeat of God, more about listening.
Precisely. It's that two-way street, quieting ourselves so the Spirit can reveal the hidden needs, the deeper currents in our community. What should we really be praying about together?
And this concept of praying across divides, when leaders from different backgrounds, different traditions actually do it.
They often find these common longings, don't they? For mercy, for justice, for revival, things that run deeper than their specific theological distinctives.
It makes the things uniting them feel much bigger than the things separating them.
Yeah. And that case study of the Welsh revival in 1904, 1905 is just incredible. Leaders from rival chapels basically decided to put aside debates and just pray together, hungry for God.
Yeah.
And this unplanned, unstoppable wave of revival just swept through. It showed the immense power unleashed when unity is forged in prayer, even when doctrinal differences still exist.
So prayer lays the groundwork, but how does that actually translate into getting things done together? Strategic collaboration, from vision to action. Yeah. The idea is that praying together yields a unified vision.
Right. As diverse groups genuinely seek God's will, a shared dream can emerge, like a vision for a transformed city, justice, flourishing communities, and that shared vision becomes a powerful rallying point, something different ministries can all get behind.
And then the practical side, mapping complementary gifts, like doing an asset map.
Exactly. Understanding what each church or ministry actually brings to the table. Strengths in teaching, mercy ministry, outreach, whatever it is.
So you're not duplicating efforts or competing.
Precisely. It's like an orchestra, right?
Yeah.
Each instrument has its part, contributing to the whole sound. Avoids duplication, avoids unhealthy competition. It's just smarter collaboration.
And finally, covenantal agreements. The text says these aren't necessarily complex legal things.
No, often much simpler. Promises. Commitments to pray for each other regularly, share resources where it makes sense, keep communication lines open.
That sounds like the bedrock of trust and accountability.
It is, and these agreements, they're sealed not just by words, but by that shared desire for kingdom impact, aligning around something bigger than any one group's agenda.
Okay, then there's this metaphor of the unified ascent, like climbers on a mountain.
Yeah, often we're all heading for the same summit, maybe seeing our communities changed, lives transformed, but we're climbing in isolation, on different routes, maybe not even aware of others nearby.
Our fragmented footholds, as the text says, not as powerful as a coordinated climb.
Exactly. But the text brings it back. Strategic, spirit-led prayer is the rope, the thing that binds our efforts together, turns isolated climbs into a communal ascent.
And it reminds us again of those roots of the silos, theology, culture, worship styles, leadership models, why we climb separately sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And then it brings in Jesus' high priestly prayer again, John 17, that deep plea for oneness, that they may be one, so the world may believe.
Underscoring that unity isn't just nice, it's crucial for our witness.
Absolutely. And again, the early church in Acts 4, facing threats, they prayed together, and the result was boldness, divine intervention. It shows that catalytic power of unified prayer.
So let's get really clear on strategic prayer itself. The text defines it as collective, right? Multiple leaders, congregations.
Yes, and intentional, targeted at specific barriers or needs, not just general prayers.
And discerned, guided by the Spirit, not just our own ideas.
Right, and the mechanics follow from that. Gathering across boundaries, intentionally bringing diverse voices together for prayer.
Creating shared agendas, focusing on common concerns together, not just my church's needs.
Exactly. And establishing an ongoing rhythm, regular networks, maybe unified fasts, larger prayer gatherings, making it sustainable.
The historical examples are really powerful too. The Moravians in 1727. Continuous prayer igniting global missions.
Incredible, isn't it? That unity in prayer just transcended everything. Geography, culture, it had this massive worldwide impact.
And the Oxford and Cambridge missions, later on inter-college prayer, sparking huge coordinated missionary efforts.
Again, it shows that when prayer is the unifying core, the impact can go way beyond the local. It can shape global movements.
And the broader kingdom impact mentioned.
Yeah.
Like Coordinated prayer being linked to lower crime rates in some places, or synergy in church planting.
Yes. The Manila example is great pastors from tons of denominations praying weekly, then launching joint outreach addressing real city issues, traffic, slums, youth needs, tangible results.
Or Operation Andrew churches, uniting for evangelism, focusing on prayer and relationships over hammering out every doctrinal detail.
These examples just drive it home, don't they? Prioritizing prayer and collaboration leads to real measurable impact that we probably couldn't achieve alone.
So for you listening, if this resonates, what are some first steps? The text suggests just convening a multi-denominational prayer network. Simple outreach.
Absolutely. Just start the conversation,
Well,
then maybe co-create that strategic prayer map where the needs, where the strengths in our area. Gives a shared focus.
and maybe trying a unified fast on a shared issue, hosting joint training workshops.
And importantly, soliciting the testimonies publicly, sharing the stories of answered prayer, growing unity. That builds faith and momentum.
These seem like really concrete ways to move from just talking about unity to actually, doing.
Definitely. A practical roadmap.
Then there's this profound idea, almost a paradox, that the deepest unity comes not from our agreements, but from prayer itself. Prayer as the bedrock of common ground.
It's that reminder, isn't it? At the core, every genuine believer stands on the same spiritual soil, approaching the same Father, through the same Son, by the same Spirit. That levels the playing field.
And the theology behind it. One mediator. 1 Timothy 2.5. Jesus is the access point for everyone.
Right. It dismantles any spiritual hierarchy. In prayer, we're all just fellow seekers, equally dependent.
And the Holy Spirit's unifying work from 1 Corinthians 12. The Spirit knitting hearts together in prayer in ways our strategies just can't.
And the text contrasts this with how fragmentation starts those distinctives leading to pride. But prayer has this restorative rhythm.
How so?
Well, bowing together in confession and petition, it humbles us, reminds us of our shared frailty, our common need for God's guidance. It recenters us.
And the underlying principles fostered. Dependency over competence. Relying on God's power, not just our smarts.
And listening before speaking. In that quietness of prayer together, we often find those shared burdens that go beyond our individual ministry silos.
The historical examples really back this up. The Moravians, the Edinburgh Conference in 1910. Prayer laying groundwork despite tensions.
Yeah, they show it works. So practically building these prayer-founded bridges, establishing monthly interchurch prayer hubs, thematic prayer marathons.
Integrating prayer into collaborative projects from the start. Maybe prayer retreats before launching.
Exactly. And nurturing ongoing connection, shared prayer resources, maybe an app, and definitely those testimony intersections in joint gatherings, sharing the stories.
The impact mentioned is significant too. Cultural transformation, missional synergy.
It really argues that prayer isn't just helpful for unity, it's the cornerstone, the essential foundation for an authentic witness.
The next section digs into a fellowship forged in prayer, using the early church as a model. And the key point seems to be their response to threats.
Right. They didn't primarily draft papers or form committees. They gathered to pray. That was the first instinct.
And their prayer was marked by authenticity, vulnerability.
Yes, which dissolved barriers. And that shift from agenda to alignment, seeking God's mission, not just pushing their own plans.
Leading to that dependency cultivated, pride eradicated, humility born from relying on the Spirit.
And it notes their roots in Jewish prayer traditions, communal lament, petition. This built their corporate identity in Christ.
So shared prayer led to shared resources, a sense of belonging together.
Exactly. The story after Peter's release from prison captures it. Unified prayer erupts into bold witness. Power flowed from that prayerful unity.
So how do we live this today? Establishing prayer anchors, regular citywide gatherings, welcoming everyone.
Creating vulnerability circles within those meetings, safe spaces for real sharing. Developing shared prayer agendas for common concerns.
Forming post-prayer action teams, translating burdens into outreach, and providing testimony platforms.
It connects this to systems theory, organizational psychology. Basically saying a prayer unified body is just more resilient, adaptable, effective.
It really makes the early church example feel relevant, not just historical. Prayer as a living strategy.
Absolutely. Forging that true corporate identity in the crucible of shared prayer.
Now this is interesting. When walls yield to whispers, the idea that our ultimate loyalty isn't to our denomination, but to Christ.
And prayer is the quiet force that helps dissolve those institutional walls we build.
The biblical foundation. Christ as cornerstone and head. We're all unified under him equally.
Right. And corporate prayer becomes this act of submitting our competing agendas to his lordship.
It revisits how silos often start with earnest convictions but lead to division. But prayer is the unseen unifier.
How? By reorienting our allegiance back to Christ first, cultivating empathy for others in his body, revealing how our different strengths actually complement each other.
The example of a simple, multi-denominational prayer breakfast seems key here.
Yeah.
Informal, focused on shared needs.
Exactly. Those often lead to unexpected alignments, shared vision, without a big formal structure.
So, practical pathways. Rotating prayer hosts among different churches.
Praying specifically for the other's burdens, holding joint prayer and planning retreats, creating shared prayer resources.
Accountability partnerships between leaders from different streams.
Yeah. The text links this to social identity theory. Prayer shifts our primary identity to followers of Christ, builds trust across groups.
So unity isn't uniformity, it's a symphony, right? Diverse voices harmonizing around God's will.
Beautifully put.
Then it frames unity as a mandate etched in heaven's blueprint. Not just nice, but commanded. A strategic weapon.
John 17 again, oneness so the world may believe. It's central to God's plan.
And connecting it to Babel, wrong unity. Psalm 133, blessing and unity. Ephesians 4, foundations of oneness.
And directly addressing the spiritual warfare aspect. The enemy divides, our disunity helps him.
Key principles. Trinitarian unity is the model. Unity in diversity.
Yeah.
And covenantal bonds over mere contracts.
Right. So practical pathways, covenant-based prayer alliances, joint spiritual warfare training, unified mission mapping, annual unity assemblies, shared accountability cells.
It really drives home. Unity is a strategic posture, an impenetrable front for the kingdom.
And disunity isn't neutral. It undermines our witness, plays into the enemy's hands.
Next, prayer as the great equalizer. How it breaks down pride and ambition.
Because prayer forces humble dependence, right? And doxology focusing on God's glory, not ours, that levels pride.
The crucible of unity, prayer stripping pride, shifting focus to kingdom burdens, building empathy.
Then the biblical precedents are there. Acts, Nehemiah, Solomon, prayer forging unity around God's purpose.
How does it work? Shared vulnerability, vision synchronization, spiritual covering, collective listening.
It just reorients us from self-promotion to God-centeredness, clears the path for real unity.
Okay, moving from the spiritual to the practical. From shared burdens to shared breakthroughs. Unity in prayer leading to tactical collaboration.
Yeah, the idea is that sincere, unified prayer often births a shared vision that just demands coordinated action, bridges the heavenly and the earthly.
Using the body image from 1 Corinthians 12, again, interconnected, each part vital. And the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15, as leaders praying for wisdom together.
So, key elements for effective collaboration: shared objectives, role clarity, accountable structures, a unified spiritual declaration.
And the tools. Prayer-driven planning workshops, resource-sharing platforms, intercessory watch teams for projects, unified communications, evaluation and celebration rituals.
The City Harvest Coalition example shows it. Working churches uniting, fueled by prayer to tackle hunger, jobs, youth mentoring, real impact.
So prayer fuels effective, coordinated action, leads to tangible transformation. Then the idea of the summit as sacred space, of a deliberate pause for regional transformation, spiritual alignment.
Like Moses on Sinai, Jehoshaphat's fast, the early church gatherings, intentional, focused intercession before breakthrough.
The principles: spiritual alignment, shared vision casting, concentrated intercession releasing God's power.
And the anatomy of an effective summit. Pre-summit prep, alignment intel, summit structure, consecration, vision, prayer tracks, worship, planning, commissioning, and crucial post-summit follow-through, prayer watches, accountability.
The Metro Awakening Summit example shows these can lead to real collaborative initiatives and resource pooling.
It really frames the summit as more than a meeting, a potential spiritual hinge point for a region.
Building on that, the Intercessory Summit, uniting hearts for a city's cry, forging shared burden, finding pathways for transformation.
Based on Paul's call in Colossians 4 for watchful, thankful prayer, a spiritual coalition, it counters the enemy's isolation strategy, a convergence point.
The anatomy: strategic design, invitations, briefings, summit flow, lament-focused intercession, prophetic calibration, commissioning.
The mechanisms: emotional synchronization, spiritual synergy, cognitive reframing, seeing the city through prayer's lens.
And the example of a summit leading to job programs, anti-trafficking laws, student prayer growth.
It reinforces that focused, unified, spirit-led prayer in these settings can break barriers and ignite transformation.
Then the power of shared sacrifice, multi-church fasting and prayer, a collective cry of humility.
Rooted in Joel 2, Acts 13. Principles, visible humility, shared burdens leading to shared breakthroughs, strategic intensity against strongholds.
The mechanics, coalition building, defining purpose, communication, logistics during the fast, follow-up discernment.
It even brings in ritual theory. Collective efficacy, shared practice strengthens group identity and belief in making a difference.
And a practical roadmap, coalition, objectives, mobilization tools, media, support systems, follow-up rhythm.
It really conveys how shared sacrifice deepens unity and unlocks spiritual impact.
Expanding on that, united fasting seasons, coordinated periods, multiplying spiritual momentum.
Based on Matthew 18, agreement in prayer, early church practice, principles, amplified spiritual authority, shared vulnerability builds trust, sustained focus against strongholds.
Anatomy, coalition formation, calendar design, communication strategy, resource mobilization, culminating celebration.
The example of a 21-day fast leading to reduced crime, cleanups, renewed cooperation shows the potential.
Underscores the power of collective hunger for God, potential for harvest when sustained, shifting to resources, from parallel paths to shared purpose, synergy through collaborative generosity, overcoming duplication.
Biblical basis. Acts 4, shared possessions. 2 Corinthians 8-9, grace of giving. Jesus' model with disciples. Addresses why we fragment resources. Argues for benefits of collaboration. Maximizing strengths, better governance, unified vision.
The CityCare Community Hub case study is powerful churches pooling resources for food, homelessness, tutoring, synergy in action.
Draws on organizational theory, network effects, joint initiatives create collective impact beyond individual capacity.
And a roadmap. Core team. Define scope, metrics, celebrate shared wins. A practical tool, mapping our prayers, uniting our hearts, the shared prayer calendar, transforming isolated intercession into a collective tapestry.
Biblical basis in Acts 2, historical development of communal prayer times. Principles, intentionality over ad hoc, shared burden ownership, amplified collective voice.
Mechanics, platform choice, thematic focus, promotion, feedback loops.
The example of a citywide calendar focusing on civic needs, improving morale, shows its value.
Provides a blueprint for creating one, fostering a more unified prayer culture, then active prayer. The sacred pursuit of the streets, prayer walks, city mapping, embodied prayer transforming pathways.
Roots in Jesus' walk in Galilee, Elisha's walks, Nehemiah's inspection, principles, incarnational intercession, discerning the spiritual landscape, rhythms of listening and vulnerability.
Historical origins, Moravians, urban prayer movements.
Anatomy, prep team, the walk map, noting strongholds opportunities. Debrief action planning.
The Hope Trail and Brookhaven story shows transformative power, breathing life into neglected areas.
Connects to sense-making, ecological psychology, builds social capital, empathy for place.
And the modern tool, the digital upper room online intercessor networks. Technology is a new temple court.
Origins, from prayer chains to apps. Principles, real-time response. Inclusivity, accessibility. Accountability, follow-through.
Mechanics, platform selection customization, user rules, resource integration.
The Metro Connect Prayer Hub illustrates impact, connecting churches across a region for various needs.
Discusses sacred stewardship of tech moving beyond scrolling to real supplication. Finally, Heaven's Roundtable, citywide strategy boards, altars of alignment for collaborative transformation beyond single ministries.
Shifting from updates to engaging divine revelation, relational trust, spirit-led responsiveness, emphasizes prayer-driven agendas, broad representation.
Spiritual foundations and their work. Collaborative discernment, resource pooling, contending for revival.
Practical steps. Start small, pray, big spiritual ground rules, discern city themes, mobilize initiatives, document stories.
Envisions potential to incubate projects, mentor next-gen leaders, become a unified movement of intercession and action.
A powerful call for leaders to rise above silos, gather like elders at the gate, discern the spirit, contend for their cities.
The material wraps up with the narrative of a unified front, hammering home that unity isn't just nice, it's a sacred strategy, essential. Looking back at Acts 1:4-2, Chronicles 20, unity precedes power.
Using that symphonic body analogy, again, harmony and diversity, richness from each unique part contributing. Strategic unity means discerning the big picture, mobilizing strengths, creating momentum, stewarding the city.
Practical applications. prayer councils, reconciliation initiatives, and acknowledging the barriers: pride, suspicion, history, busyness.
But always returning to John 17, our unity is for the world to believe. It's a call to rewrite the narrative from fragmentation to faithful Christ-centered unity.
And The Harvest Awaits paints that final vision: transform cities, nations, the kingdom of power, not just talk, driven by prayer, collaboration, unified action.
Drawing on Joseph, Daniel, Esther individuals impacting cities, painting possibilities, addressing obstacles like territorialism, cynicism, offering next steps, prayer maps, cross-sector summits, investing in next-gen, telling testimonies.
It leaves us with this really hope-filled challenge, doesn't it? To believe transformation is possible when the church embraces deep unity, fueled by prayer, expressed in action. So as we wrap up this deep dive on prayer and strategic collaboration, the key insight really is just how powerful and maybe underestimated intentional unified prayer is. For achieving that deeper unity, that collaboration we need for real impact in our churches, movements, cities.
Exactly. It's more than just a personal thing or a warm-up act. These excerpts show it can be the foundation, the engine for our collective efforts, the frameworks, the stories. They offer a practical path towards that.
It's a fundamental shift in perspective, isn't it?
It really is, seeing prayer as foundational strategy.
So for you, our listener, as you process all this, maybe consider this. What's one single actionable step you could take this week to move beyond maybe isolated efforts and start weaving a stronger cord of prayer and collaboration right where you are? Perhaps revisiting some of those practical steps we talked about might spark an idea. Yeah, and maybe looking into any reflective exercises or to-do lists that might come with the source material could be a great next step for digging deeper into this really vital topic.